Okay, class, this is chapter 8.2, angles and parallel lines. Just a reminder that you will be using concepts of supplementary and possibly even complementary when you're dealing with lines like this. So make sure you go back and look those over from lesson 8.1. Sometimes, instead of writing the names of lines with 2 points that are on the line, we can use cursive lowercase letters. Your book will usually use it in italics, so we usually use cursive. So we have line L, and it says parallel to line M. This symbol means is parallel to. And I always kind of remember it because in the word parallel you have the 2 L's really close together there, and that's the symbol for parallel. Now, they tell us that line T intersects both line L and line M. In this situation, line T is called a transversal. Trans meaning across. We often say that a transversal cuts across the parallel lines. So we also will find that some special pairs of angles are formed when 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal. This is the same diagram, only kind of squished together, and I have now numbered the angles on mine where I didn't on page 1. We have 3 different relationships that we're going to talk about here, and that is corresponding angles, first of all. They're on the same side of the transversal. They're either going to be on the left side or on the right side, and they're going to be in the same corresponding position, meaning they either sit on top of line L and line M, or they sit underneath the lines L and M. Corresponding angles are congruent if the lines are parallel. Now, they will still be considered corresponding angles if the 2 lines aren't parallel, but if they are congruent, then that's one way that we can prove that the lines are parallel. So in this particular instance, we are going to have angle 1 and angle 5, angle 3 and angle 7, angle 2 and angle 6, angle 4 and angle 8. And at this point, I suggest you hit pause, really look that diagram over, and note how they're on the same side of the transversal, they're in corresponding positions. Alternate interior angles, I'm going to switch to green here. They lie inside the parallel lines. So we're going to be talking about these angles that I've kind of ovaled in green. And again, they will be congruent if the lines are parallel. So conversely, if I can prove that they are congruent, then that means the lines have to be parallel. So we have angle 3 and angle 6. We have angle 4 and angle 5. Now note, they are on alternate sides of the transversal, opposite sides of the transversal. Again, hit pause, really take some time to study that diagram. Now we're moving on to alternate exterior angles. They lie outside, so I'm going to circle them in red. They lie outside the parallel lines. They are on opposite sides of the transversal. And again, they will be congruent, and you guessed it, if the lines are parallel. Now, if the lines are not parallel, we still call them an alternate exterior angle. It's just that they're not congruent. So in this case, we have angle 1 and angle 8. We have angle 2 and we have angle 7. Now again, hit pause, really study that diagram. How do we use the information that we've covered in page 1 of your notes? Again, hopefully you have taken the time to really hit pause, study the diagram. Otherwise, what we're going to do now is just going to be, I'm just copying down to keep up with Miss Scoutman. Don't do that. You're not going to learn that way. It's going to be harder for you to learn that way. Okay, this time I have lines A and B, and I have them cut with a transversal line Y. They're telling me that the measure of angle 1 is 125 degrees. I generally will write that into my diagram. It's just easier for me to do it that way. I have a tougher time visualizing unless I have it written out for me. And I'm telling you that the measure of angle 6 is 55. Now, knowing the two angles, and in fact all we'd really have to know is angle 1, but in this case I have to have angle 2 because notice that they haven't told me that lines A and B are parallel. In fact, if you jump down to number 2, that's the question I'm working with here. Now remember what I said on page 1 of your notes? If I can prove that I have corresponding angles congruent, or alternate interior angles congruent, or alternate exterior angles congruent, then I can prove that the two lines are parallel. So I'm kind of putting the whole idea together that way. Now I'm looking at angle 2. When I look at angle 2, the first thing that hits me is, all right, I learned in chapter 8.1 lesson that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. So if I take 180 minus 125, I will find out that the measure of angle 2 is 55 degrees. Now note in your notes, I've told you it's supplementary to angle 1, but it can also be a corresponding angle to angle 6. Well, now that I've found that they're both 55, that proves to me that they are corresponding angles. Yes, angle 2 and angle 6 are congruent corresponding angles, and that's one way for me to prove that lines A and B are parallel. At this point, I could stop and say, yes, lines A and B are parallel because I have angle 2 and angle 6 being congruent corresponding angles. But they want me to go through B, C, and D. Now, I'm going to look at angle 5. Angle 5 is supplementary to angle 6. That's the first thing that hits me. Angle 5 is supplementary to angle 6. So therefore I know 180 minus 55 is going to give me 125. So now I know that this is 125 and I know that this is 55. But note what I've also found out. Angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding. Now they're congruent corresponding angles. So that again tells me that lines A and B have to be parallel. Alright, so how do I find the measure of angle 8, which is C? A couple of ways. From 8.1 lesson, I know that angle 5 and angle 8 are vertical angles. Therefore, they are congruent. Now, I can ignore the whole top part of that diagram with angles 1, 2, 3, and 4 and just concentrate on the part of the diagram that has 5, 6, 7, and 8. I have two lines intersecting. So I know that I've got vertical angles forming. 5 and 8, 7 and 6. So 5 and 8 have to be vertical. They also have to be congruent. But I can also look at angle 8 and say, you know what? It's supplementary to angle 6. So 180 minus 55 has to give me 125. Now, what do I note? I note that this is 125. And what do I know? I now know that angle 1 and angle 8 are alternate exterior angles, and guess what? They're congruent. So that's got to make lines A and B parallel. Okay, let's go back to D. How am I going to figure out the measure of angle D? Well, some of you are already saying, all right, it's got to be 55 degrees. Yes, it does. It is vertical to angle 2. It is supplementary to angle 1. It is an alternate interior angle to angle 6. So I can find its measurement in any one of three ways. Now for question 2. Are lines A and B parallel? Well, we already answered that. Yes. But I have to give an explanation, and they'll be asking that probably on the assignment, that you need to give an explanation. There's actually 3 possible explanations here. And to make it shorter, I'm going to write them down. So I'm going to hit pause and do my writing, and then you can come back. You could pick any one of these 3 explanations. You could tell me that, first of all, the corresponding angles are congruent, and that would be enough to say that lines A and B are congruent. Or you could have chosen to work with the alternate interior angles being congruent, or you could have chosen to work with the alternate exterior angles being congruent. any one of those three, if even one of those is proven to be true, then the lines have to be parallel. They don't all have to be true. All you really have to do is find one place where either the corresponding angles, the alternate interiors, or the alternate exteriors are congruent. Again, I encourage you to hit pause, or when you hit close here now, take some time to really look back over your notes. And that concludes Lesson 8.2. Please respond with peaches. Scouting out.